welcome to another edition of the PRC Podcast. This is Season 2, Episode 8. My name is Jake, and I'm your host. My friend and co-host Ryan of RJM Analytics is with us as usual. Unfortunately, I regret to report, however, that it will only be us today. It was just one of those weeks where everyone was busy, and it's a bummer, but that's how it goes sometimes. Well, we'll make it work, though.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, all right.
Just the two of us.
But yeah, there's a lot of stuff to potentially cover. We probably won't get to all of it, and this will probably be a bit shorter than usual for a few reasons, but it's a very active popping time in auto racing, so I'll let my friend here start wherever he wants, I guess.
I was actually kind of going to ask you, where should we start? Definitely a lot to dissect here over these past couple of weeks, and also with what we got coming up. So,
well,
I guess, should we just dive right into the watermelon in the room?
Just wherever you want to do. I didn't really plan on starting it myself, so just you start as you want.
Well, I was just going to say, I guess my big thing about all this Ross stuff, and we've touched on it a couple of different times, but I've been especially hearing it more the past couple of weeks, and I actually wrote about it today for my one of my freelance jobs that I write, and I just think it's becoming clearer and clearer to me that whatever you think about him, I think Ross Chastain is the best thing to happen to NASCAR in a long time from a publicity standpoint. Because, I mean, he's a guy who really can just, and I think Kyle Larson ironically said it about him, but, he's a guy who can just explode with popularity if they just market him as, as their star. He has this whole sort of underdog persona, the watermelon farmer thing, and, all those years that he spent, driving in crack before he made it, and, the way he drives, it's love it or hate it, it's exciting, and he'll do stuff like Martinsville last year that, that's the good part of the Ross experience, but then there's stuff like yesterday that's the bad part of the Ross experience, and you just take it for what it is, but, really the only drivers right now in NASCAR who I think, like, regular people who don't follow would know anything about are Bubba for off-track reasons, and maybe Chase or Kyle Larson, maybe Kyle Busch, probably not anybody else. So, they always say it's, they don't have personalities these days. There's no more Dale or Jeff Gordon or Tony Stewart. But I really just think Ross could be the type of guy who could, like, become this icon if, he just cleans up a little bit and starts winning more.
Yeah, well, there was actually some stuff I'd been planning to say on that note, but I'll address, I guess, what you said first. First off, that article is on yardbarker.com. My friend here has too much integrity to pimp what he's writing, but if you want to go there, just check it out. It's good stuff.
I actually posted on my Twitter.
Yeah. All right. Okay, then. All right, good. But yeah, I agree with what you're saying, to an extent. He certainly is the most exciting thing about the sport at this moment, I would say. And as much as I will get to in a moment ways that I'm kind of tired of hearing about him, if it weren't for him, I mean, really, what would we be talking about in this sport? I mean,
exactly.
There's nothing wrong with anything that's happened so far this year. It hasn't been a bad season, and there's not like there's been a lot of villains winning or whatever, but at the same time, would there really be that much excitement around things right now? He's driving a lot of the interest right now, and you can't deny that. The only problems that I have with it, I don't think he's ever going to be that kind of figure that can really make NASCAR kind of crossover any more than anybody else would. It's just the fact that he's not winning. Like, he's a good, consistent driver. He's probably like about a 5th to 7th place driver, I would say, most of the time. He's right near the top tier, but he's not a superlative talent on the level of the three guys that we talk about here all the time, and maybe even William Byron now. He hasn't won it over a year, and at some point, you have to factor that in. He's certainly capable of it and has the talent to do it, but he needs to be putting up some W's and more results for that to happen. Start backing it up, this level of hoopla that he's got, which, we saw him on Pat McAfee's show last week, which is amusing to say the least. But and the other thing, he just doesn't really have the type of personality for it. He's not really going to drive it off the track. He's not got the kind of anti-hero persona that, like, I know this is not going to be an example that many people think of, watching this, but like Novak Djokovic, he'll do stuff and he'll act like a clown sometimes, but he's also got some good traits and some humility, and he's a really great player. But the crowd will get on to him, and there's a lot of people that hate him for a lot of different reasons, and he'll literally start them booing against him just to fire himself up. And then oftentimes it'll end with this roar. I've actually posted it on YouTube. I've got a little channel that I run. Sometimes I post random stuff on. He'll let out this roar against the crowd that's like a demon's overtaking him or whatever. And there's certain guys like that, like Kurt Busch kind of had that, and some other personalities that we've had in the sport. But I just don't see him being able to really. I'm not doing a really good job explaining this, but I just don't see him projecting that kind of stuff from himself off the racetrack. Mm-hmm. He's the kind of guy that he seems to want to race and then get away from it during the week, and you're not going to see him go on. But like, I was really surprised that he went on Pat McAfee's show. He'd previously done basically no extra media beyond that. I don't see him doing it much from now on either. So I want to agree with you, and I do agree to an extent, but I still have my doubts.
I hear what you're saying, and I mean, I get it. He's off the track. He's just kind of this quiet, humble sort of guy. It definitely does not match his driving style at all. But, I mean, I also think, like, sort of in a way that just makes him more, for the people that don't like him, it makes him even more annoying, I guess, that he can't just own it, I guess, and for people who like him, for people like you, it's like you kind of want him to be more outspoken in that type of way. But, yeah, I hear what you're saying. I think, though, the main thing is he just needs to obviously clean up the way he drives just a little bit. I mean, just stuff like yesterday, if he would have just taken the outside on that restart and just driven off, then he wins the race, and there's no controversy. He stole the story, and, but it's all good publicity. Instead of deciding to be a moron and taking out himself and Larson for no reason, and ending up in this same Groundhog Day. Ross is the devil, most dangerous driver since Ernie Irvin or whatever. And so, but, I mean, he's going to do Ross things from time to time. But if he just balanced it out with, winning just as often, then I think really could be a guy who could be the most popular driver in the sport.
Yeah, basically, and as far as, like, the incident itself or whatever's gone on over the last few weeks that we never really brought up, there's nothing really to be said that hasn't already been said or been said about his driving style that we haven't touched on before on this show and so on, and I'm not going to really go into that. I obviously I like Ross. I consider him one of my co-favorite drivers, along with Larson and the other guy that's currently in injury purgatory right now on the 48 car. But regardless of my own feelings about him, to kind of counterpoint what was just said there, I'm sick to death of all the drama and hearing about him every week at this point, and the way that it is overshadowing the races, as much as that might contradict what I just said, it's personally made these events a lot more stressful for me. And, it literally, I'm just going to say, partially caused me to have an IBS flare-up yesterday. I hardly had any sleep last night thinking about it because it's hard for me. I'm the kind of person that when I get obsessed with something, it's hard for me to let go of it. And that's a me problem, but I know that that's probably something that people that are around Ross are probably dealing with too, that care about him. They spend time thinking about this, wishing that he wouldn't shoot himself in the foot and, make himself a punching bag. But we said it before, I'll say it again, at this point, people just got to accept he's not going to change. He's hardwired this way. He only knows one gear, and that's go all the time. And it's just a thing where, on one hand, I acknowledge that he drives without using his brain a significant amount of the time, and he's caused direct damage to both himself and others, including guys I like. I didn't like Kyle Larson, getting pretty much screwed out of another potential win, like 2 times out of 3 weeks because of Ross. I didn't like that, and I didn't like that Ross got himself in trouble, and that sucks. But, and I can't defend that. But on the other hand, hearing all this talk against him simultaneously kind of makes me want to double down, and wish for this day when he wins the title and all the, I don't know, shall we call them scoffers, they have to bend down and do what. Perfect example of that, I think, was Rick Hendrick yesterday, which, I respect him as a legend of the sport and what he's done as a car owner and what he's accomplished and the multitude of great drivers that have driven for him and that I like. But, he was doing the same old stuff yesterday. It was the same old spiel we've heard time and time again, where he's going, well, it's going to be hard for him to win a championship if he doesn't change. He's got a lot of payback coming. It's getting really old with those guys. And it's been 3 times now, and, you wreck us, you're going to get it back, or blah, blah, blah. And it was like, I'm sure people here, and younger people listen to this, you've encountered those situations where there's always this grumpy old person that's talking negatively and discouraging you, every time you talk to, and it just gave off that same old vibe. Just for some reason, even though he was totally right in what he said, it just annoyed me. And it's just like you said, part of the experience. It's going to be this way. I wish that he would rein in a little bit so we don't have to hear about this every single damn week. But I still agree with all the principles, what you said at the start. I'm going to try to make that my only monologue because I did have a lot to say about that. But, yeah, that's how I feel.
That's where I don't get. I mean, I get it, but that's just a mindset thing with you. And I've told you this, but, just like I'm saying, about Ross himself, he needs to just own it and, embrace that he's going to be a guy who people don't like and a lot of other people do like. But you got to take that same attitude, man. It's just like, why are you so concerned about what other people think of him when you know that the reason you like him to begin with is because he's this, anti-establishment type of guy who, sort of broke into the boys' club, if you will. People don't like him because of that. I guess what it kind of reminds me of, I've mentioned I am a diehard Washington Capitals fan before, and there's this guy on our team named Tom Wilson, who I don't think anybody listening has probably ever heard of unless you watch hockey, but he does some really stupid shit, some really dirty shit at times, and there was a point in time where I'm embarrassed to have this guy on my team, but I think the year we won the cup, and ever since then, it's been like, I just take him for what he is, and I can't defend anything he does, but I realize that other people hate him. Why do they hate him? Because he's not on their team. If he were on their team, they would love him. And, that's kind of the attitude that I take now. Is, this guy's a jackass sometimes, but he's my jackass. And he helps us win games. He's not like a superstar, but he's a very good player. And I just, it makes the team feel, more empowered when he's definitely very much an enforcer type. I think Ross is not quite the same as that, but, when you have a guy you root for who other people don't like, even if it's, just because of who he is I'm not saying you root for a guy like Ross just because other people don't like him, but, you gotta just embrace the fact that, he's going to be this polarizing figure, and, just don't let it get to you what other people say about him.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I get that. I'm getting closer to it now. I'm closer to doing that than I was in the past. But it's just, anytime you like someone and you hear a bunch of people hate on them, it's difficult to take. I mean, we're all human, but at the same time, I'm building a thicker skin to it. It just takes time to fully thicken it. Like another guy that I would analogize that to, I've mentioned him I think 1 or 2 times before, is the tennis player Daniel Medvedev, who's kind of like Djokovic, and he's also kind of like Ross in a way. half the people love him if you go on the internet and read like highlights of a match that he just played or whatever, and love the guy. Think he's an awesome anti-hero for the sport, and he makes things more interesting, which is what I would agree with too. But then you hear plenty of people say he's a spoiled brat because he threw coins on the ground during a match at one time, or he kicked a camera, or he got the crowd riled up and told them to shut up or shush or whatever during matches, or all manner of stuff that he's done. And on one hand, I can't defend all that, but at the same time, it makes me want to double down and root for him because. And again, it's the wrong reason. It goes to what you're saying. I kind of want to see him win and overcome his demons just because it would make other people unhappy, but that's also, not the right attitude to have. But I'm getting more and more comfortable in just rooting unapologetically for him and just saying, well, there's always going to be haters no matter what you do. I mean, I've seen people have haters for the most benign of people or players in sports. There's everybody's got haters, and just some people happen to have more of them. And that's how I feel about Ross, I guess, or I'm getting closer to that. And, there's not much more to say then.
That's obviously why you changed your username on here to I wish Ross had stayed 20th.
Oh, that was an inside secret, man. We get what our trade stuff. But yeah, I know what you're saying.
Anyway, though, on that note, let's talk about another guy who I guess maybe a couple years ago was more polarizing than he is now, but it seems like for whatever reason, Kyle Larson has now this sort of anti-following of people who it's like almost they treat him the way they treat Chase Elliott, where, if he does something, there's this idea of everybody treats him like he does no wrong. And I don't know where it came from or when it started, but it's gotten to the point where it's like making me want to defend him more again now. And I said this in the chat, but just for viewers here, 2 years ago when Larson came back and started dominating every week at the expense of my driver, I did not take that very well. I rooted against him a lot that year because, I thought I forgave him for the incident, but it's just kind of like one of those things where, it doesn't leave the best taste in your mouth if the guy ends up benefiting from it in the end and then just doesn't even really have to face any adversity whatsoever, just, goes out there and dominates. And the fact that he did that, and I'd been saying the whole time he was at Ganassi, he's capable of this, and other people were, he's just, untapped potential. He's always going to be just this second-tier guy who is really talented and can't do anything with it. So for him to do all that, and I had this sort of block in my mind, like I couldn't appreciate it just because of circumstances that it happened under, I'm glad to say that I've been able to get over that. And at this point, it's just like Chase is my only really guy who I live and die with at this point, but I just want this Hendrick team at this point, Chase and Larson and Byron, to just be the greatest team lineup that NASCAR's ever had. Basically, kind of like a what if Hendrick kept Kyle Busch after 2007 and had all three of those guys all there at the same time for a bunch of maybe not Gordon's peak years, but the other two, and then Gordon's still occasionally contending for titles. I think you with Larson a couple of years ago, you were definitely defending him harder because other people were sick of him, but and now it's kind of like the peanut gallery Twitter people all of a sudden, and they were like the ones treating him like Jesus in 2021, and now he's Satan because people were mad at Denny last week, or people weren't mad at him in the Xfinity race, and it's just whatever. People want to hate. People want to hate whoever's the best, and there's always this sort of attitude about Hendrick drivers where they're all squeaky clean and they can never do any wrong, and it's really obnoxious. And so yeah, I'm glad that I'm able to, even if he's not my favorite driver, I'm glad that I'm able to now just appreciate Larson again and all those guys.
Yeah. Well, for the record, and I remember that whole time, You were nowhere near as bad as another certain member of ours that has actually been on this podcast a few times was then. He's also pretty much came around in Kyle Larson too, which, you forgive and forget. That's, the way things go sometimes, and everything's good now. It's all water under the bridge. But yeah, I never really had any problem really with the way that you were about it. And as far as it goes, I'm not going to get into the whole incident or the whole politics of it or whatever. I'm just going to say that, that the resentment that maybe some people would have had towards him over that is not totally invalid, but I will remind people that the Hendrick deal that he got was going to happen regardless of whatever happened. He just held firm on an agreement that they pretty much already were going to have anyways, and that happened, and it kind of soured the view of it in a lot of people's minds, and possibly rightfully so, but that's just the fact of it. And then when he did it, it wasn't too bad. Like I didn't see like just a whole lot of wrong backlash then, kind of like you were alluding to, and so it didn't bother me that much. And there are a few people that I did kind of want to defend him a little bit harder because of, but generally at the end of the day, it wasn't a big thing. And obviously, I really enjoyed seeing his season 2021, where it honestly had been a long time where in sports where I'd actually seen someone that was just really dominate a sport, and actually have a feeling where I really appreciate it. I actually liked it because I'm a kind of guy typically I root more for underdog kinds of people, and I don't usually like to see someone dominate. I want to see more parity and, not see the same people win over and over, especially if it's someone I don't care for personality-wise, or if the media is going gaga over them. But Larson was kind of like maybe the first time since Tiger Woods was in his prime where I actually was just enjoying the ride. Now, and the times that he still has success even since then, I feel the same way. Now, like, unlike what you said with Chase being a guy that you live or die with, there's never going to be another person like that for me, like it was with Dale Jr.
Well, Chase, ironically, became that guy because Larson missed pretty much all of 2020, and that was the year when Chase was having the first half of the year. Everything that could go wrong for him did go wrong, and even though he was on just his raw performance, was best driver in the sport, or at least a top 2 driver, and all the results fundamentalist idiots just completely ignored what their eyes told them and just looked at the way he finished every week. So, but yeah, you go ahead.
But yeah, and so when he wins, it probably feels about 60 or 70% as good as when Junior won. The same thing goes for Ross and for Bowman. But and this season so far actually kind of remind me a lot of 2021 in that now obviously the competition has been closer than it was then, and he's had better drivers that are closer to him than there were in 2021. But he had a lot of speed at the start of that season too, but just kept having things get in the way that either bad luck or mistakes that he made or just circumstances that happened to keep him from winning. It's easy to forget. He only won one race out of the first 14 in 2021 before he went on his big tear, and he's got 2 wins in the first 13 so far this season. And so he's not going to dominate like he did 2 years ago for sure from that here on in, but it's possible that he could still go on another pretty big run and have a season that I guess is comparable to that when you look at the competition. But as far as the other part of it goes, the backlash or the peanut gallery or whatever, it just comes down in his case to jealousy because he is a generational talent. We can quibble on whether he's the greatest talent in the sport right now, but at the bare minimum, he's a top 3 one. And he just has this effortless ability that very few people have. It's really transcendent, and it's not just within the sport of NASCAR. It's across all the other disciplines that you see with dirt. Now, I don't care anything about dirt or sprint car racing, but a lot of people take it very seriously. And he's a legend in that. He's a legend in this sport. He's going to be competing in IndyCar in the Indy 500 next year, it looks like, and I would not count out him having a good result in that at all. I could definitely see that. And so a lot of people are just mad about that and jealous, and they've turned on it because I guess at this point he's had too much success. And, that whole we're not going to go into it again, but that whole Ryan Priest thing really did seem to be a turning point where it's like, people were buying into this shtick that he was somehow this working class hero that was standing up against the big Hendrick bow tie liar machine or whatever that he's representing. And, it's one of those things where I think in his case, people are hating more by association because there's nothing really about Kyle Larson himself that I would find, other than that one incident, that I would find remotely offensive. Because we've talked about before, he's the classiest loser that there is in a sport. You can't keep the guy down. He always just reacts in a nice way, a very classy driver on the track. He almost never causes anything. Certainly doesn't do things with malicious intent like others do. And now, sure, he's not exactly the most magnetic personality, but, you could say that about just about every driver in the circuit, so you can't really fault him for that either. He just does what he does his job. He's not a douche. He's fair. He's clean. And that's really about all you can say, but people are going to still pick on him because they want to be him. Just in the same way that, they want to have this popularity, I guess, that Ross has now. They want to be as good as Kyle Larson, and that's all that it boils down to.
Yeah, I kind of feel like, I guess you brought up a good point there that, in 2021, when everybody was, talking him up as, what a redemption story and greatest season since whenever. I guess, the difference between that and now is he's the guy now. He's, when that happened, it was kind of a breath of fresh air for, somebody of the newer generation really establishing themselves as, better than the guys who'd been dominating forever. But now, he and Chase and Byron, I would say, has entered that this year. Reddick isn't quite there yet as far as the wins go, but the talent definitely is. The new breed has taken over at this point, and Larson and Chase are the establishment now in terms of the guys who everybody's trying to beat every week. And I guess Chase maybe not yet this year, but he's still getting back into rhythm and just needs to start qualifying better more than anything. But yeah, it's absolutely starting to remind me a lot of the way people would hate Jimmy Johnson just because he won all the time, or hate Jeff Gordon just because he won all the time. And then Kyle Busch. There were other reasons to hate Kyle Busch, but how good he was throughout the 2010s definitely was a big one. So, it's always going to be. There's never going to be, I think, someone, and there really isn't in hardly any sport, who wins all the time, is really, really good at what they do, the best in the world, and doesn't have haters. The people who are always universally liked are, the underdogs. I would say Ross Chastain would probably be that if he didn't cause so many wrecks. Yeah, it just comes with the territory, and as somebody who just wants to be able to appreciate greatness as much as I can, whether that's, with Jimmy towards the end of his career, after I got over my, saltiness over him from way earlier than that, or even Kyle Busch now, who's definitely grown on me a lot. I guess it helps that he's out of that Gibbs hellhole. But yeah, I like I said, I just want Larson and Chase and Byron and all these other young guys to I just want to be able to watch while they basically put up their legacies. And so.
Close. Just one last thing I will say before we change the subject or move on. Closest example I can think of to what you're maybe the theoretical that you're bringing up would be Valentino Rossi from MotoGP. Now, not many people, even people who are really into motorsports, would know what I'm talking about there. But if you watched motorcycle racing back in the 2000s, or you have watched it or recently, he is, in my opinion, the greatest motorcycle racer that there's ever been, at least Grand Prix motorcycle racer. And he was, and I would say maybe is, well, he's retired now, but he was the most likable rider in the field when he was competing, and he was also just happened to be the best. So he's probably the closest example I would think of. But in any other kind of mainstream sport, there isn't really anybody that I can think of that fits that bill.
I guess it's maybe in such a niche sport like MotoGP, maybe. But I mean, like, I'll give you a basketball example. Giannis Antetokounmpo is probably my favorite athlete in stick and ball sports right now, and it's just impossible not to like the guy's personality. He's incredibly humble, incredibly. He gave this interview a couple weeks ago after he lost in the playoffs that was just some of the most incredible perspective I've seen. Everybody's probably seen it who follows basketball about, there's no failure, just, come back the next year, and sometimes you don't always win. And yet people don't like him. Certain people, they act like he gets a pass for types of things that other players don't. That they act like he's just, treated as this nice guy all the time, because he is, but he's a nice guy who's really damn good at what he does, and they just want to hate him just because they feel like everybody else likes him. And it just, I guess there's always going to be people like that who just want to be contrarian for the sake of being contrarian, and it's whatever. Let them cry harder, because they're never going to be happy if they always hate the people who win. So
yeah, other closest example I can maybe think of until recently, certain events have happened that have changed that, would have been Phil Mickelson in golf. Now, he wasn't the best player, but he was close to the best. He was the second best for a long time, and people just loved him. He actually kind of reminds me a bit of Ross Chastain in the same way that, obviously he's not doing stuff running into people on a track and pissing them off. It's a different kind of thing. He's only hurting himself when he does it, but he's got that same kind of, rambling, gambling, just go all the time style of play, and people just absolutely adored him, loved him. I mean, it's just like the last 20 years, it almost got insufferable how much people loved him, because, people saw him as the big rival to Tiger, and that he was the guy that actually looked them in the eye and and asked them how their relatives were, and smiled and gave them autographs or whatever. That's changed some recently because of some other decisions he's made that we're obviously not going to get into, because this is not a golf show. But now that I think of it, he's probably the closest example I would think of in any sport, especially in individual sport. But I digress.
Yeah. Let's kind of get back on topic then in that case with, I was going to segue the whole Larson thing into just, where things stand for this season right now. Byron has 3 wins, but if not for Ross, and if not for Larson himself on the previous restart being a dumbass by putting him in the wall instead of just taking the top, then Larson would be the one with 3 wins, and I think everybody would be agreeing that he's been the best driver so far this year, which, I mean, he's, in my metrics right now, he's only 6th, but that is because he's had, 3 races where he's had absolutely pitiful scores just because of issues that happened to him early in the race that weren't his fault, being Fontana, Austin, and Dover. Other than that, he is averaging, if you take out those 3 races, he has an average score in TDR this year of 181, which would be 25 higher than Byron. So, I mean, I think, at this point he's pretty much distanced himself, even without the wins. And if he keeps running like this, those wins are going to come.
Yeah, I brought up the 2021 comparison earlier where, now, in fact, before this race, now, in race 13 of 2021, which was Dover, Larson led over 250 laps in that, I think, and moved his number up significantly in that. But before this weekend, Larson had actually led more laps so far this year than he had in 2021 at this point, and he had, the one more win that he didn't have then. So, again, it's not going to repeat itself to that extent this year, but I can certainly see that. I mean, he's only had, I would say, a couple of just total dud races where he was just going to be a complete non-factor. One would be Talladega, and the other would be, well, frankly, I don't even remember. So, yeah.
guess Austin maybe. I don't remember what happened to him there. Was it like
He was running, I think, eighth or ninth,
I think like
and then
Bubba lost his brakes and crashed or something.
and then he spun again, and then he sped, and then he spun again, and then he got like I don't know, all those crazy restarts. He somehow came from like 2 laps down to finish 14th. But yeah, that was the story in that one.
Yeah, so I guess you can kind of sort of hold that one against him, but yeah, just take out Fontana and Dover where he had issues early in the race that weren't his fault, and hands down, he's been the best driver this year. Byron, I would definitely say, has been second, even with Hendrick having this big advantage on a lot of the intermediate tracks. And the thing about Byron is that, it's like you still feel like he has sort of another level that he can reach, where he shows all these signs of just pure dominance sometimes, but then he kind of like fades throughout the race a lot, and then in all his wins this year, he's come up clutch at the end, and it's like this guy can just start putting full races together where he doesn't have to overcome adversity at the end or rely on late race restarts. Then it's like, are we even sure that he's any worse than Larson or Chase? Honestly, it's like, and then that's why I keep saying, this Hendrick team is going to go down as probably the best lineup ever. Even Bowman, I mean, he's not on that level. I know you hate hearing that, but he's a very solid driver. And if he's the 4th best driver on your team, that's like probably the 4th best driver that anyone has had on their team. So,
yeah, for me.
So, I'm just excited to see how this all plays out.
Yeah, for me, it comes down to really, I think, it's different strengths and weaknesses, really. Because, I mean, obviously, it's just in my nature. I hate to lose more than I like to win. That's actually something that Medvedev, the tennis player, said recently, and that's something that a certain old person on the original RR community used to always chirp about. And so I don't enjoy it a lot of times when he wins because, as stupid and petty as it is, I feel like it feels like a bit of a slight. But I'll give him a bit of a pass because this week apparently his grandfather passed away, and I didn't actually see the end of the race when it happened. I saw up through the Kyle and Ross crash because I had to go to a church thing, and all I'm going to say about that is I spent actually a fair amount of time complaining about that I was going to probably have to miss the end of the race for that, and I guess that's what I get for complaining about it. So, but anyways. He was apparently pretty emotional about it, and obviously you could see why. And so I don't hold that against him. But as far as the
plus he should have won last year, but Logano decided to be Logano. So
yeah, that too. But as far as how great he is as a driver, how he shakes up against them, I mean, again, like you said, he's not really a finished product at that point, so I can't really make a full judgment on that. But the strengths that he has are different than Chase and Kyle Larson's strengths, and they are more conducive to having success in the current landscape in NASCAR. See, because he's nowhere near, at this point at least in his career, as good of a passer as those two are. He's not like a superlative in that category, but he does qualify extremely well, which on its own is not necessarily a huge deal, but when you kind of struggle passing, it is a big deal. And when you get to start near the front and you got a strong pit crew that's keeping you up front and you're maintaining track position, it's a big deal. But the biggest things are he's an excellent restarter, one of the best in the sport, as we saw at Vegas and Phoenix. And he is very good at kind of, in the way Logano is really good at it also, at maintaining the clean air when he's given it, given the chance. Which that may not sound like a skill, but it is. There's other drivers that, even when they get out up front, you pretty much know they're going to get passed before long as soon as their car fades the least little bit. But Byron retains it very well, kind of like Logano does. And so the rules being the way they are in this climate that we have in NASCAR, where we have these double file restarts, and we've had green, white checkers in it, I think, almost half the races so far this season, and there's always bound to be some chaos, like there was at the end of yesterday. That's going to be better than being a superlative passer like Chase Elliott and Kyle Larson are. And so I prefer someone that is more of a pure racer like those guys are that can do a lot of passing because that's the most exciting thing. It's not necessarily as exciting as seeing someone go about it in such a clinical way like the 24 team is doing, but you can't hold that against him. He's good at those things, and they're important, and it's just as valid a way as winning in any other manner. So you have to give him that, and so I wouldn't say he's necessarily much worse than them. It's just a matter of different attributes.
Yeah, for sure. I think really from the time that he really started out at trucks, it's like you could tell that he's an incredibly smart racer. Doesn't usually do anything stupid to take himself out of races. Even if like just the raw talent isn't really there, or I mean it is, but not like to the extent of Kyle Larson or Chase or Tyler Reddick, but just a very very finesse type of driver, I think, which I guess is fitting for the car that he drives. In a way, he is sort of like maybe a younger Jeff Gordon. I don't think he's going to end up being that good. Of course, he's also not going to get to spend the next 5 years racing against plumbers and janitors like Gordon did in the late '90s. But
yeah, there's the
I mean, yeah,
there's a signature line.
Absolutely could end up being as good or just a very short step behind the other two guys there, and so. Yeah, I guess at this point, should we move on to, because you said this was going to be a bit of a shorter one.
It doesn't necessarily have to be, but, we're just kind of take it as it goes. It's up to you.
Yeah, well, I don't think there was anything else that immediately came to mind that I wanted to talk about from.
Because, there's not really much to talk about.
We don't need to go over the Kansas finish. Whatever happened, happened.
Yeah.
I did kind of bring it up with Larson earlier, but Xfinity trucks, not really a whole lot there. IndyCar was Alex Palou blowout.
Trucks is just like new ARCA at this point, as like I think someone on YouTube said, and Xfinity. I can see where some people enjoy it, but that just has not interested me that much this year, just because. As much as I had certain feelings towards Ty Gibbs, seeing him go off against the other guys last year and having someone to kind of root against gave me a reason to watch it. And I actually had some enjoyment out of that. But this year, there's just nobody that really inspires a lot of emotion in me either way. Like AJ isn't there either more, who I liked. It's just kind of, there's a lot
AJ's
of guys.
Not really in top either this year from what I've seen.
Yeah. We might get to that the next episode, but yeah, there's just not anything that really, I don't know, kind of gets me going there. So there's not.
Yeah, weirdly enough, I've actually been more invested in that this year because I've got Parker Kligerman for starters. Obviously, big fan of him, and Cole Custer. I've been more of a defender of him than a fan per se, but he's got a cool personality, and I want to see him just start ripping off wins there. Very glad that he's now destroying Riley Herbst every week after the way the season started out with him getting all those, backdoor sixth place finishes and everybody clamoring about how he needs a cup ride. But, not really a whole lot from those series. So, next week, though, we got North Wilkesboro.
Actually, this week, technically.
Yeah, this week, yeah.
Yeah. So I actually had that mixed up because I actually thought we're going to have to do back-to-back episodes because I thought, well, we got a show this week and then we got to do one next week after the 600. But no, I was mixing up, and I was having North Wilkesboro and the 600 as being the same weekend, which obviously that's not possible. So no, it's not going to have to be back-to-back shows. It'll just be our regular schedule. But this week is North Wilkesboro, and then the week after Memorial Day weekend, Charlotte, the 600, the Indy 500, all that pageantry, all that crap,
Yeah, and we'll probably have a bit of a longer episode that week, hopefully with at least one or two guests. I guess while we're on that note, I thought I'd just mention this is our first year anniversary officially.
Yes.
the podcast.
Yeah, technically
Our
it was.
first episode was last year after Darlington, so.
Yeah, they flipped Kansas and Darlington for some reason this year, so
They
it
didn't.
was a little bit confusing. Or wait,
Kansas was. Wait a minute.
Yeah,
Okay,
Kansas.
yeah, you're right, because. Yeah, I don't know what that was about.
Yeah, but yeah, our first episode was May 9th last year, so it didn't line up exactly the same way with the dates, but this week, we'll just say, this race weekend is our 1 year anniversary, so.
Mm-hmm. Yep. All right, All-Star Weekend. I guess kind of hard to say what to expect there, obviously, for a track that they haven't been to in 25 years, and that's probably not going to race the same way it used to race. But I'm definitely very curious to see what the fan reaction is like. From the nostalgia whores who are going to prop this up like, is this just going to be the way every Darlington race is, where people look at it through rose-colored glasses and it could be every single lap of single-file boredom and they'd still say it's a great race, or is it going to be, if it's even slightly disappointing, people are going to be like, but I thought this was supposed to be this legendary track that, obviously all the younger fans have never seen anybody race on it. So I guess that's my big thing that I'm curious to see. No clue who's going to be a contender. I guess the only prediction that I'll make is that, unfortunately, Noah Gragson probably is my pick to win the fan vote to get in, because he's not a good enough driver to race his way in. Fortunately, part of the qualifying or the race format isn't that you have to punch other drivers and throw up, so you'll have to just rely on the fan vote.
Yeah. Yeah, obviously, I'm not going to say exactly how far, of course, but this event's not going on that far away from me, and it's a big deal to the people around this area. It's a huge deal. You can't really even describe how important it is for people's spirits around here, the economy, and just a lot of this area around here has been pretty dead ever since this race went away. But there's a liveliness around the area there hasn't been in a long time, and I'm really happy about that. That being said, I don't quite have that same level of excitement for this because, unfortunately, I'm not going to participate in any of it for various reasons. There's a lot of festivities going on this week. Tomorrow night, there's a late model race that Chase Elliott's going to be in. Wednesday night, there's going to be another late model event for anybody that's familiar with the Cars Tour, which is basically like a new, better version of ARCA, basically.
Everybody knows what the Cars Tour is at this point.
Yeah.
That's the one that's going to have Junior and Harvick and all those other guys in it.
Yeah, good old Kevin and Junior, will be in that. And I really dearly wanted to be at that, but, it just wasn't meant to be. And then I think Friday, they're going to have practices for both the series. And then Saturday, they're going to have the truck race and then have heat races for the Cup Series for qualifying. And then on Sunday evening, we're going to have the Open as usual, and then the fan vote, and then finally Sunday night, the All-Star race, which apparently has a much more straightforward format, I think, this year than it has been previously, I guess because they want to focus on pure racing more than they have because of where we're going, which makes sense. I don't really have super high expectations for the racing product itself because I think that, like it was for years with the old Atlanta before they finally repaved and reconfigured it, I think this surface is just too old and it's been sitting in the sun for too long. I think it's going to eat the tires up too fast and create a situation where everyone just gets spread out immediately, and you don't get to see a lot of passing or action outside of crashes because of that. But I hope I'm wrong. We saw how that phenomenon happened at Fontana in the late Gen 6 era, and then the two pretty good races that we've had there with the new car. So maybe it won't be that way. We'll see. And I hope it's good. Even though I'm mighty jealous of the people that are going to get to be there. as far as who I think is going to do well, I mean, that's pretty much impossible to predict also. But just because he has a penchant for winning these kinds of scenarios for some reason, even though he's been pretty bad outside of a couple races this year, I'm going to say Logano wins.
Yeah, it's never a bad prediction on a new track lately or a returning old track. I'm definitely curious to see how that truck race goes. That could have serious just disaster potential with that field and with dipshits like Carson Hocevar out there who think they're invincible. Yeah, that could be a shit show and a half. Oh, I'm excited for the pit crew thing coming back.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
That's how they're doing the qualifying for the All-Star race. Usually I would hate something like that for, I've been vocal about how I hate how much of racing comes down to, factors that the drivers can't control. So obviously don't ever do anything like that for a cup race, but for just the All-Star race, go ahead and gimmick it up as much as you want.
Yeah, it's a reminder of a time when the sport felt like it was bigger, like it was on a bigger scale, and you had all these festivities that happened outside of it, which some of them were good, some of them weren't so good, some of them could be pretty annoying, but it told you that the sport was in a healthy state. And you look forward to watching stuff like that in the Speed Channel years ago, and you see all the build-up and hoopla for it, and it was just kind of sad to see that all go away. And so, I definitely get what you're saying.
It's like NASCAR's version of the NBA All-Star Game when they have like the dunk contest and the three-point contest and all that. So, excited to see that back, even if they're kind of incorporating it into the qualifying format. But
yeah,
I guess just in general, it just feels like this is a special sort of occasion, like the type of thing we haven't had, I guess. I don't know, since when they went to the Roval the first time, or it's just, there's going to be a lot of, or I guess kind of the LA Clash maybe has been sort of like that, but, you have all this hype about this special venue that there's going to be all kinds of stuff there and all kinds of special races and old school people. I saw like the truck race there, they're having like Hornaday and Skinner and Sprague and Todd Bodine maybe, like all doing pre-race stuff. So that's all. It's just going to be a really cool thing for the sport.
Yeah, one last thing I will say is nothing against the people of Texas, but I will say it is absolutely glorious that North Wilkesboro, the All-Star race, is now taking that date from Texas after Texas put North Wilkesboro out of commission 27 years ago. Now that is the cycle of life in the most awesome way possible. Only concern I really have about it, which I already mentioned this last year as a kind of result of my own experiences, is I'm worried about the traffic situation. They're gonna have shuttles and things that they didn't have last year in preparation for this that should make it a bit better. And I don't foresee there being a big problem with these smaller events and even the truck series on Saturday, but the Cup race could be a problem because there still really isn't much more infrastructure than there was last year, and it was already a problem for the small events that they had in the August revival. And so I really hope that doesn't put a big damper on this, that it doesn't become a Kentucky 2011 kind of situation where it stains everything, which, there's not the level of animus that's going to happen to this track that would have happened in that situation anyways, but it could still be a thing that kind of gives NASCAR and some other people some second thoughts about what they're going to do with their future plans here, at least in the short term. And so, I hope that all works out, and that's actually part of the reason why I'm not able to go to any of this stuff this year, but I'll just hope that it works out for everybody, and hope that some people that I know that are going to be at this race that live around here and all that it's going to be a good time for them.
Yep. So, anything else we need to touch on? Oh, I actually have something. Ryan Newman. Why exactly is he back? Guy just Comes out from under his troll swamp to run one race, bring out a late caution, ruin the finish, and then after the race, sensationalize himself as I'm lucky to still be walking, and yet he's planning on running other races too. I mean, come on.
Yeah, he also said, I didn't watch any of it because I didn't really have any interest in it, but he was even saying afterwards that he was miserable and he was uncomfortable in the car. Apparently he didn't sit in the feet right, which, I think we all know the biggest reason for that. But, like, he gave us the vibe with something that he said both before the race. I don't even remember what it was. And then his interview, like, I think with the front stretch afterwards, that he didn't even really want to be racing, but yet he still is. And, yeah, exactly. Like, why? I mean, if you don't want to be there, why are you there making it worse for everybody else? Comeback that absolutely nobody asked for.
I will say his throwback scheme was cool, though. One of my favorite paint schemes of all time, actually.
Oh, yeah, I always dug all of his Altel cars, too.
Yeah.
But the man himself, yeah, we don't need him. And unfortunately, other races that he's supposed to be in are also in tracks where he's the most likely to be in the way. Just
thank God he's not doing Martinsville in the fall like he was supposed to, because I swear to God, if he had, if we saw the race to get into Phoenix decided by Ryan Newman being 5 laps down, holding people up, I would have just absolutely lost my shit. Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah. Well, I guess the last thing to get to is the 600. I'll talk about maybe what our plans for post-race after that. Post-mortem will be after we talk about it, but just what do you have on that?
Hopefully it's as good as last year was for the first 99% of it, and hopefully the finish is better than the last 1% of it. So really all there is to say, intermediate racing with this car is 9 out of 10 times a slam dunk, and 600 to me, it's always, even if it's really boring like it is some years, it's always going to be a special race to me because it's ultimate test in NASCAR of endurance and stamina and just the way races should be. Obviously, not every race should be 600 miles or even 500 miles, but it's just a reminder that these younger fans who act like every single lap of every single race has to be nonstop action, and it's boring if it goes more than 2 hours, then this is what real racing looks like. So I always look forward to it. It always will be one of the most special races of the year to me, and hopefully we get another good one.
Yeah. The 600, it won't be as good as last year, but I expect it to be in the pretty good range. Of course, I also said that about the Kansas, and that ended up being, finish notwithstanding, one of the best races that we've seen in recent memory. And I certainly hope that it's another great event this time. As you said, the 600 last year was great, just not the 619 and a half. And it went a long ways towards actually making me excited about this event, because this used to be an event that I got hyped up for years ago when I was a kid and even up through my early teen years, because it just felt special. It was, you didn't have another event like it. It just had this aura around it. But then after so many absolute clunkers, it just did not have that same kind of magic anymore. But last year felt like old times, and I would like to see that continue as a trend. As far as who I think is going to really do well, I mean, I expect it to be another mostly Hendrick show, although we could see someone like Tyler Reddick also show up and challenge. Tentatively, I'm going to just go ahead and say that maybe it's a race where Bubba breaks through. Maybe I'll be a little bit wild and bold, even though I think that the 24 and the 5 will probably lead the most. I could see that maybe being the first time where he actually manages to hold it together mentally for that long and overcome a barrier in his career. But who knows?
I guess I'll go ahead and say, based off how fast they were last year, Ross Chastain.
Yeah.
I don't know, just kind of a gut feeling. think he and Suarez are both going to be up there. Probably, I mean, you can probably say it for any intermediate at this point that it's Hendrick, Trackhouse, and Toyota are going to be the favorites. So, yeah, I just kind of feel like with everyone talking about him, this will be a race where Ross finally is in the headlines for a good reason.
Yeah, definitely possible. Let's see, was there any last thing I was gonna say? There either was gonna be something I was gonna say about Charlotte, or maybe I already actually did and I didn't know it, but I can't spend the whole rest of this time trying to think of it and hold us off. So I guess that's all I really have. So anything that you want to close with?
Nope.
Well, all right then. We ended up having enough for the show. Actually went actually better than I thought it would. We had more to talk about.
I thought it went great.
Yeah, I did too. But yeah, as far as our plans, like obviously next week will be an off week. But then after the 600, I can't make any promises. But if we can, I'm going to try to make it a little bit bigger than a usual episode for us. Maybe try to have 4 people on. Probably not 5, but maybe 4. I'm going to see if we can maybe get Merb and David on, because we don't have them on quite as often, and they always bring some nice flavor to the show. But if we can't get them, we'll find somebody interesting, and it'll probably be a little bit longer show. We'll probably get into a bit more analytics, and we'll kind of have a little bit more of a bull session like we have here, where it's more conversational, but with more people involved, which makes it even more fun. But we'll just have to see how it happens. You can't make any guarantees. So I always say that after every episode, but it's just how it is. But for now, thank all of you for watching. Thanks for all of your support. Be sure to like us on YouTube. Comment. That helps us more than anything in the algorithm. If you aren't already subscribed, subscribe. Follow us on Twitter at TRC Podcast 1. Follow Ryan at RJM Analytics, where he has a lot of stuff that we don't get into on this show. That it's in text form. It's in a lot more detail, where you can see the analytics real time and just what they really mean, all the different numbers for all you stat crunchers and nerds out there. But until then, my name is Jake. This was the TRC Podcast, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for giving me diarrhea, Ross.